So I'm not going to go through young carers much, but just to say that we fought very hard to get young carers in. So it's when a disabled person of any age is being assessed and there's a carer of any age. And so that could be a 5-year-old or a 10 or 15 or 115. So it's age neutral. The new bill that's being proposed has got really will just be for adults, so it will cause havoc for young carers. And on my website I've got a paper we've written about that. But I think the government will change its mind. But at the moment, all the benefit, all the gains we've made for young carers could be lost if the bill isn't amended. Then in 2000, I'm going to accelerate now, but we're nearly there. In 2000, another bill comes along, and this is called the Carers and Disabled Children Act. Again, it's actually technically a private member's bill, although in fact the government drafted this, but used Tom Pendry's slot in the private member's ballot to push it through. The government wanted to strengthen the law for carers because it had promised in the 1997 election manifesto that it would strengthen the law for carers. This is the Blair government. Why did Blair want to strengthen the law for carers? It's neoliberalism. It's the third way. It's, these are the group of people that do stuff. They're not capitalism, they're not communism, they just do it sort of free. We now call it big society, don't we? But this is sort of very much part of the lingo. The other thing you've got to remember about this, and it's worth realising, because it does actually make a big difference. Blair was a carer. When he was 12, his father had a stroke. His father was a barrister. His father lost his voice, lost the ability to speak. His father never worked again as a barrister. And for 2 years, the Blair household did care big time. So Tony Blair was and does get caring. When the 95 Act came out, I wrote a book about that. I write books on everything. He wrote the foreword to that, and he wasn't a big cheese then. He was not, the hated figure that he is today. So Blair gets caring. Gordon Brown's got a profoundly disabled child who's going to get worse and worse unless something miraculous happens in science. Cameron, of course, had the most profoundly disabled child who died. And it is very important when you're trying to push this stuff through, that factor, because it's quite an interesting factor that Brown or Cameron or Blair are not so crass as to say, I'm going to prioritise carers because I was one. But the group of people around them, those sort of vile people around them, they call it the cabinet, I think, these toadies, they know that caring is close to Gordon's heart. They know caring is close to David's heart or Tony's heart. And they know that if they support these bills, they will get reflected support, the thick of it sort of stuff. And so we have always, with carers, I've got a bill going through at the moment. It's not going to get through, but they're going to use some of this, somebody called Barbara Keeley. They are very, they're hesitant about being anti-carer because of the big vote, 6.5 million, because it's the third way, but also we have a very unusual period with quite senior politicians with quite significant caring responsibilities. So anyway, there's Tom Pendry. He's not quite so pretty as Malcolm was. All this bill does is do two things. It says a carers can be assessed even if the disabled person's not being assessed. Sometimes, not unfrequently, you get people with mental health problems who refuse to have anything to do with social services. The local authority can now assess the carer even though there's nothing, they've got no contact with a disabled person. And this brought in services for carers. I'm not going to go into services very much. It's only a power. At the moment, when a local authority assigns a carer needs a service, not the disabled person, a carer. They have a power to provide that service. Under the new Health and Social Care Bill, that will be made into a duty. So that there will be it'll be a more I'm not sure it will add up to a tin of beans, but it is a better situation. What are carer services? Well, they're not respite care because that's given to the disabled person. Carer services is the thing you just give to the carer. I think I'm very rude about them. I think they're tokenistic, symbolic. They're cheap, generally. You give the carer some travel assistance today, for instance, to pay for carers to come to a meeting. You give them training. I was somewhere the other day and they've given them resilience training. I love this. You're giving carers resilience training because it's going to be so hard. You're going to need to toughen up. Relaxation therapy, counselling, mobile phones, so the carers can go out and phone back in or be contacted. Trips, holidays, special events. Surrey's just flown a family to Disneyland, don't ask me about it. Driving lessons, gardening just for the carers. I'm very rude about these because they are cheap, like all these other things. But curiously, they're highly valued. All the research shows that carers do value this. Often now carers are being given personal budgets of £100, £200. I think that's a real cop-out, but in fact it's highly valued.
Are carer services means that?
At the moment they're not. So carer services, these generally, I mean there are one or two local authorities, I doubt if Shropshire charges these, generally these are free. With the new bill they will become routinely charged for, which is really retrograde.
And is it just those things?
No, it's anything. It's anything that would help the carer care for. You know, there's, as I say, sorry, it could be anything. I mean, I got a garden fence for somebody once. There's the greatest book written in social care, in my view, in the last 50 years is a thing called The Gift Relationship, which is about blood donation. Why do people give blood? Is it Michael Timmins? Anyway, it's an extraordinary book. It's quite old. It's out of print now. But he looks at why people give. And of course, often we write our name so they know we've given, and there's all this sort of stuff. But of course, with blood donation, you don't. And he looks at how, I mean, it's great for me because, of course, it shows in the UK we give blood. We don't get paid for it. Blood in the UK, 96% of it is used. It's very cheap because there's a national service. It's very high quality. In America, you pay for it. They've commodified blood. There is a market in it. It's incredibly expensive because everybody is buying and selling it. Very low quality because people lie about their health because they do it to get money for drug addiction and other things. And 96% of it is wasted. So it's the idea about commodifying things. Doesn't always be a very good idea. But he talks a lot about why do people give and the symbolic value. I mean, come and do your social care masters, but come and do a PhD part-time at law school. And just do one, I mean, just very interested, there is a symbolic nature to services. You know, people value an assessment, a carer's assessment, enormously. Just sitting with somebody, the empathy, the quality of an assessment. You can't quantify that and say, oh, it's 13%, it's 3 billion. There are things that have a quality that, you know, empower and sustain people, just relationships in a way, that you can't put into money. And that's why I'm very unhappy about commodifying, putting a figure on assessments and things like that. Anyway, these are valued, even though I look at them and think they're a small value, small cost, there is a value to them. So local authorities should review that decision, perhaps. Yeah, I'm not going to go into parent carers either, but parent carers are covered by all this legislation because it's a carer of any age caring for a disabled person of any age. So parents of disabled children have a right to a carer's assessment. Often it's not going to be necessary because the disabled child's going to have an assessment, a carer's assessment. But if the children's team's saying, well, you know, we're not going to let you go back to work because it's your kid, it's your responsibility, we're not a babysitting service, then the parent carer should ask for a carer's assessment because that would then look at their needs. Very quickly finishing now, another bill comes along in 2004. This is again one I dropped.